Good afternoon. Welcome to the Indiana edition of our webinar series exploring state findings from American Farmland Trust's recently released Farms Under Threat 2040, Choosing an Abundant Future. Before we get started, let me talk through some quick logistics. Everyone's been muted. No need to worry about any background noise on your end. You can see from the agenda here that we are leaving time for questions towards the end. To ask a question, you'll do that through your control panel. So if you look on the upper right-hand side of your screen, you see an orange box with a white arrow. That opens and closes the control panel. If you open it up, you see that there's a questions section in there. If you go to the far right-hand side, you look at that little square box with an arrow sticking out of it. Click on that, and that'll pop the questions piece out. Put your question in there and we'll get to them toward the end. Below that questions tab is a little handouts thing. If you pop that one out, it will take you to a copy of the full Farms Under Threat 2040 report, as well as to the Indiana summary, which we will talk about a little bit today. If the control panel is in your way when we get to the website and are looking at the maps, again, just remember to click that little orange box with the white arrow, and that can minimize the control panel. And then lastly, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar. Please feel free to share that with whoever you think might be interested and wasn't able to make it on today. So with that, let me introduce myself and my co-host, who will introduce our special guest. I'm Chris Coffin. I'm American Farmland Trust Senior Policy Advisor, and I'm Director of our National Agricultural Land Network. And let me just say just a little bit about that network. It was created in 2020 after we released our Farms Under Threat State of the States report, because we realized that one key thing to reducing agricultural land conversion is to build the capacity of people like all of you who are on this webinar today to do more to save the agricultural land base, whether that is through permanent protection, whether that is through planning and zoning, whether that is through other tools, incentives, disincentives. There are many things in the toolbox, and what we are hoping with the network is that we all learn from each other and how to do more. So we encourage everybody to join the network, and I'll share information at the end on how you do that. With me today is Angie Doucette. Angie is AFT's Midwest Farmland Protection Manager. Angie works with partners across the Midwest to build capacity and develop resources and trainings for practitioners working to safeguard our farmland, our environment, and our farmers. So thank you, Angie, for joining us. And before I turn it over to Angie, let me just take a minute to talk about American Farmland Trust for those of you who may not be familiar with us. We are a national nonprofit membership organization founded in 1980. Some know us best by our bumper sticker, No Farms, No Food. We had a bumper sticker before that, which said, "It's not farmland without farmers." I liked that bumper sticker because it acknowledged that we understand farmland and we understand farming. We take a holistic approach to agriculture. Our national initiatives and our regional programs focus not just on protecting the agricultural land base, but on the practices used on the land and on the viability and profitability of the farmers and ranchers working the land, both those on the land now and those who aspire to be on it in the future. Our programs, our research inform our state and federal policy advocacy, and we like to say we work from farm fields and kitchen tables to the halls of state capitals and Congress. We have 6 regional offices, including the Midwest region, where Angie is based out of, and our national offices in Washington, D.C. And with that, let me turn it over to Angie.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all so much for joining us today. I'd first like to recognize and thank the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service for their partnership and financial support of our Farms Under Threat research. Farms Under Threat is AFT's multi-year initiative to document the status of and the threats to America's agricultural land base. NRCS has been invaluable to this entire research project, as has our research partner, Conservation Science Partners. For this report, we also collaborated with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And now, without further ado, I'm really excited to welcome a very special guest with us here today, Jordan Sager, Deputy Director of the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. Jordan grew up in Jasper, Indiana, where he was involved with his family's poultry operation and graduated from Indiana University with a degree in public affairs. In 2011, Jordan joined the Indiana State Department of Agriculture as a field technician and has since moved his way up to Deputy Director. In this role, Jordan oversees the day-to-day operations of the department, represents Indiana's State Department of Agriculture and committees, engages with producer organizations, and identifies strategic opportunity to grow the state's agriculture sector. Thank you again, Jordan, for joining us today. So you've had a chance to review the summary findings from the report. I'm really interested to hear what struck you most about the findings.
Thanks, Angie, and thanks, Chris, for the invite to participate in your webinar here today. And would just want to recognize you and American Farmland Trust for the noble cause that you guys work on every day. Definitely near and dear to us. To your question, I see this encroachment, like probably many of you, happening as I travel across the state. Your report, this report, assigns real figures to what I'm seeing, plus what others are seeing, and forecasts, you know, what that future trend could look like down the road. So you've put numbers to a visual trend that I think we all see.
Thank you for your kind words and your thoughts on the findings. How do you think this research can be used by the folks on this webinar to help save farmland in Indiana?
Yeah, and I would say two things to help really listeners understand the underlying dynamics in play for why these changes are occurring. I think first, it's important to understand Indiana is a home rule state. What's that mean? It means the local government, typically the county, sets zoning and development policy. Maintaining or building the county tax base is a high priority for these county decision makers, county council, county commissioners, as you might realize. Second, private property rights and capitalism are real, except for cases of eminent domain. If a road or something's coming through, in many cases, it's a landowner's choice to sell their land. There are a lot of different motivators, right, to sell based upon the situation that landowner or landowners are in. And you know, right now, a hot topic, a hot issue is conversion to solar, large solar panel farms. I guess I would say, you know, of how folks can be involved, use this webinar is really advocate. I would advocate for a better understanding of what those motivators to sell a farm might be. And explore offsetting those motivators with other options rather than, you know, restricting private property rights.
Thank you. Excuse me. What steps would you like to see the state or local governments, or even at the federal government level, take to reduce the conversion of farmland?
Yeah, I'll start with the locals, and you know, would call in many cases locals county commissioners, county council. Mentioned home rule, so it's important to start there. And you know, this is where development policy starts and ends. And again, keeping in mind tax base is extremely important to those decision makers. So changing a policy, adding a policy, understanding how that may impact negatively or positively the tax base is important, having those discussions. Another just thought on the local or county level is officials, especially economic development folks, need to understand ag equals business. That undeveloped, and I put that in quotes, that undeveloped corn or soybean field has ripple effects throughout the local economy, from the input dealer selling fertilizer or herbicide to the elevator or livestock producers that's buying that grain or buying those oil seeds. So that's where I would start with the county side. On the state side, this is what we do at the Department of Ag every day, but it's maintain an ag economy that makes ag production a lucrative pursuit. That entails attracting and keeping good livestock producers, food, fuel, and fiber processors that compete to buy raw materials from farms. Having more options for outlets, for buyers of raw farm materials is extremely important to maintain a competitive industry. And another big part of our job is to be on the leading edge of new opportunities. Things like bioplastics, right? Looking at using corn, especially, to replace petroleum-based plastics, and attracting those types of processors that could be part of that bio-based economy. Again, on the state side, tax incentives for agriculture to remain in ag production while not negatively impacting that local tax base is important. There's some good examples of that. And I would say lastly on the state side is something we do again is to create model ordinances that counties can choose to adopt or adapt to their specific needs. Again, kind of looking at that home rule. At the end of the day, the county is the decision maker, but the state can gather lessons learned from other states, from other counties that have gone through these processes, and allow counties to have access to those model ordinances as they consider. Lastly, on the federal side, to your question, you've mentioned the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, huge partner of ours. And a lot of the work I feel that they do is taken for granted, but you know, water quality and conservation, ag conservation is huge. What NRCS does, they have an ag conservation easement program that in about 2020 had 21 new contracts, protected about 2,200 acres of land, came with a price tag of about 9.7 million. So it's not cheap. But that is one program that's out there, the Ag Conservation Easement Program. And I would just say to landowners who are interested, want to learn more about that program that would protect ag ground to keep it in production for future generations, just go visit a local USDA service center. Lastly, on the federal side, farmers carry the most risk in the food supply chain. Weather events are a big part of that risk. And having good crop insurance that reduces some farming risk from weather and other impacts is extremely important to try to alleviate those that are taking the most risk within our food supply. Both that easement program and conservation and crop insurance are being discussed in the Farm Bill. And if you want to get involved, listeners want to get involved, lawmakers are having those listening sessions right now. And starting to debate on language to write the new 2023 Farm Bill. So that's where the rubber meets the road.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Jordan, and for joining us today. And thank you for the work that you're doing at the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. I'm excited to let the viewers on the call know that Jordan will be staying with us for the duration of the call and will be available at the end for questions if that's something that you're interested in. And now back to you, Chris.
Here I am talking and on mute. Thank you so much, Angie. Thank you so much, Jordan. That was a lot of good insights. Really appreciate that. So right now, we are going to go off camera, all three of us, so that everybody can see the charts and the maps at full scale on their screen. And I'm going to start in talking about the methodology and findings from the report. So our first two Farms Under Threat reports, Farms Under Threat, State of America's Farmland, which was released in 2018, and Farms Under Threat, State of the States, which we released in 2020, mapped past conversion of agricultural land, looking first from 1992 to 2012, and then from 2001 to 2016. In this report, we're looking forward. We're using past conversion data to model and predict future conversion of farm and ranch land out to 2040. We started with our Farms Under Threat State of the State analysis of ag land conversion from 2001 to 2016. And as a reminder, that analysis mapped conversion of land to two different types, urban and high density development and low density residential development. And here on this next screen, you can see the sort of the scope of what we consider to be in these two different buckets of conversion. On the left, the first four ones are what we consider to be that urban and high density development, which has been the traditional culprit in farmland conversion. It includes residential development, commercial, industrial development, all typically found on the outskirts of cities and towns. It also includes rural industrial sites, such as oil and gas infrastructure and solar development, anything that can essentially be identified by satellite remote sensing as being built up. Low density residential development has become the more pervasive culprit in farmland conversion, and AFT worked with conservation science partners to pioneer an approach to map and quantify the impacts of this type of development on the agricultural land base. These areas range from lower density subdivisions, which you see an example of here, and sort of larger farmettes and ranchettes. This kind of scattered large lot housing fragments the agricultural land base and makes production harder for the farms and ranches that remain. It's important to note, and you see here in these pictures on the right-hand side, that agriculture can be found on some low-density residential land. And in fact, smaller farm parcels, especially those near urban centers, can be quite profitable and quite sustainable. However, our research has found that once land has been converted to low-density residential land use, it is far more likely to be further converted to high-density development. So, starting with our historical data, we projected into the future with the business as usual scenario. Basically, we made a straight line projection using the same annual conversion rate as what we documented from 2001 to 2016 to predict the level and location of conversion by 2040. We adjusted the model to account for projected population growth or decline. Building off that business as usual scenario, we developed two alternative scenarios, which we'll get to in a minute. For each of the three scenarios, we also mapped the coastal flooding risk that is projected by sea level rise. Once we had our projection of conversion and flooding risk, we quantified the effects of these scenarios in two different ways. One, on the agricultural land type that is likely to be converted. So whether it's more likely to be cropland or pasture land or woodland, as well as on the quantity of the agricultural land projected for conversion. So what is the quality of that? And for that, we used the Productivity, Versatility, and Resiliency Index that we created in the 2020 report, and we'll talk about that in a minute. As with any modeling exercise, there are some caveats, as you see here. Most importantly, we were not able to account for local zoning. Land use regulations are inherently local, and there's no national database to tap from. This means that our maps represent the general pattern and the rough amount of conversion that is likely based on those conversion patterns from 2001 to 2016. They do not reflect what may be allowed or prohibited on the ground through local land use regulations. Our modeling also does not include the impact of water scarcity and potential fallowing of land because of lack of water. Mapping this impact is very complex and was beyond the scope of this analysis. You'll see when we get to the website, though, that we did include a data overlay from World Resource Institute's Aqueduct, which offers some projections about water availability in the future. So here are the three scenarios we modeled. First, the business as usual. Again, that's taking the 2001 to 2016 data and making a straight line projection out to 2040. The second scenario is what we call runaway sprawl. This envisions a scenario where sprawl actually gets worse. We see this trajectory is entirely possible and may already be happening in some places, driven by continued high housing costs and shortages in large and small cities, and the likely permanent shift to more remote work opportunities. Remote work will become even more appealing as rural broadband expands and improves. Lastly, we modeled the future we hope for, better built cities. This scenario envisions successful efforts to reduce the footprint of residential and commercial and industrial development on productive agricultural land. While the scenario still results in the conversion of some ag land, it envisions a future with vibrant, compact cities and towns and abundant farm and ranch land to meet the needs of the future. So a quick look at the assumptions that went into the three scenarios. For business as usual, you can see that was that straight line historical rate of conversion for both urban and high density development as well as low density residential development. We made adjustments on population growth only in the urban and high density development conversion rate because there is a strong correlation between population growth and increase in urban and high density development. In runaway sprawl, we left that same rate of that urban and high density conversion, but we assumed, based on what we talked about, that what has been the more recent driver of conversion, that there would continue to be an escalating level of conversion of low density residential development. So you see here that we projected a 50% higher from that business as usual. Conversely, for better built cities, we adjusted that historical rate down. We made it 25% less on the urban and high density conversion, again, because we understand that there have been cases where towns and cities are able to grow more compactly, and that 25% reduction is entirely possible. That 50% lower conversion rate on the low density residential development is what we felt was ambitious, but ultimately achievable. So let's now look at each scenario's potential impact. The gray bars on the left show what was converted from 2001 to 2016. That was 11 million acres of agricultural land in just the first 15 years of this century. That includes over 265,000 acres of land conversion in Indiana. Under business as usual or worse runaway sprawl, we could see another 18.4 to 24.4 million acres of farmland converted or threatened by conversion. And conversely, you see here under our better built cities scenario that if we are able to make the choices to reduce that footprint of development on productive ag land, we could get down to a much less numbers of acres of conversion. You may be thinking, you see that 11 million acres, isn't that still a lot? Is that really the best case? Is that as well as we can do to limit conversion? AFT appreciates that development, including renewable energy development, is necessary, and the need for affordable housing options is acute. While it may be possible for cities and towns to be even more compact in their growth, and we certainly hope that they can be, we chose what we believed to be a realistic scenario. These next two slides we hope are helpful in showing how Indiana compares to other states. This slide shows projected total acres converted by county. The darker the red or rust, the more acres you will see converted. And so you can see in Indiana, it's sort of a scatter shot of the counties that will be more or less impacted. This next slide compares the percent of agricultural land in each county that is projected to be developed. You see a different pattern here across the country as a whole, and again, even in Indiana. And what I wanted to point out is that Marion County is one of the projected hardest hit counties in the entire country in terms of percent of agricultural land that may be developed. Our modeling shows that the county is at risk of losing 40% of its remaining farmland acres. Another key finding relates to impacts on our very best agricultural land. For prior reports, AFT created the first ever index of agricultural land quality, what I mentioned before, that looked at the productivity, versatility, and resiliency of land, or what we called its PVR value. Land over a certain PVR threshold is land AFT considers to be nationally significant land, land which is best suited for long-term cultivation and food production. 73% of Indiana's farm ground falls into this nationally significant ag land category, or about 12 million acres. What we find in our future projections is that conversion of this land is likely to be higher than conversion of all agricultural land, likely, and Jordan alluded to this, particularly with this land. The reason why it's such productive land, it's flat, it's well drained, it's free of rocks, is also because it is the most easily developed at the least cost. The loss of this land is especially concerning. This is land that can produce the highest yields of crops and livestock with the least environmental impacts. Our modeling shows that nearly half of the projected conversion from 2016 to 2040 will occur on this type of land, even though it represents only 38% of the country's farm and ranch land as a whole. The more nationally significant land converted, the more reliant we become on marginal land for food production. And to put this potential loss of 9 million acres of nationally significant land in perspective, the total acreage of land in the U.S. devoted to fruit and nut and vegetable production is just 10.4 million acres. So this next slide shows a top 12 list that you really don't want to see your state on. Indiana ranks 9th among states in projected conversion of its most productive farmland at 321,800 acres. While we recognize this is a relatively small percent of the 12 million acres of nationally significant land in the state, the loss of this land affects both future production and profitability in agriculture, as farmers in impacted counties look to offset the loss of this highly productive land with more marginal farm ground. Reliance on more marginal land can also have environmental impacts as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angie to talk through our solar findings.
Thank you. One of the other threats we are highlighting with this report is the threat that solar development poses to agricultural land, as Jordan has already discussed today. I want to point out first that American Farmland Trust supports renewable energy development. However, we think it's essential that we plan carefully so that our most productive, versatile, and resilient land is not compromised. We also think it's possible for agriculture and solar to coexist in mutually beneficial ways. This map here shows the percent of undeveloped land projected to be used for utility scale solar, photovoltaics, energy generation facilities by state in 2040. This data comes from the decarbonization with electrification scenario of the U.S. Department of Energy's Solar Future Study. That study estimates that there will need to be 7.4 million acres of utility scale solar in place by 2040 to meet federal energy goals. If you're interested in more information about the solar modeling we did as part of this project, our solar technical paper is available through our Farmland Information Center. We will also be releasing a solar white paper later this year. And the most important key takeaway from our modeling is that 83% of the projected solar development by 2040 will be sited on agricultural land, and nearly half of the projected solar will be on those nationally significant lands that we've been talking about. So we're now going to dive into the data available for Indiana on the interactive website. And for this, we'll be going to be joined by our colleague Beth, who will be our navigator. Thanks, Beth.
Great, thank you, Angie. So before we start talking about the website, let me just remind people that if you have questions or you want to make a comment, please do that through the questions tab on your control panel. And again, for those who joined us late, the way to do that is where you see that questions in the control panel. On the far right-hand side, you see a square with a little arrow sticking out of it. click on that. That will open up that questions tab. You can write in your question or comment and send it along. And again, we will get to these toward the end of the webinar. So here we are in the website, and Beth, when she has a minute, will put the link to the website. I see she just did it, the multitasker that she is. That here's where you land when you open up that link. This cover page is a summary of all that I just talked about, what the scenarios are, what we found, other helpful information. To get out of it, you just click on that X right in the upper right-hand corner. And while we're looking at the upper right-hand corner of the screen, let's look at those tabs that are up there on the top right-hand side that Beth's pointing at. The About, click on that, that brings back that same summary document. Next to that About tab, the How To tab is a 5-minute video that talks through how to use the data layers and the various scenarios. Next to that is the View Report. That takes you to the Farmland Information Center website where Beth has just taken us. And here you can see a number of things. Again, a link to the full report, to the executive summary, to that solar technical report that Angie just mentioned, to additional information and technical reports and webinars about the methodologies, as well as to our past report, that State of the States report that we mentioned, that has a lot of useful information, and again, its own web app with various data layers in that. So we hope you all will explore that. And then next to that, you see a Request Data tab. We are making the data layers and county level data available to folks. And let me just say that this is not just the spatial data, but if you are interested, for instance, in the information about county conversion for the entire state and want all of that information, you can certainly request that as well. So this is the way you would do it, and we will be back in touch. So with that, we are now going to zoom into Indiana. And the way that you do that is you simply click on the state, and that you see what comes up below is state level information on the left-hand side. And in this case, Shelby County that came up on the right-hand side, because that happened to be where Beth's cursor was when we clicked into Indiana. So let's take a minute to look through what these findings are. For starters, you see at the state level, our projections show that Indiana is likely to lose 451,000 acres of farmland to development under the business as usual scenario by 2040. If you see here, you see that it's split into both this urban and high density development, which is the darker rust red, and then the lighter orange, which is that low density residential land use. You can see in Indiana as a whole, what is driving farmland conversion? It is that low density residential development that is likely to continue to fuel the vast majority of farmland conversion. It's slightly different when you look on the right-hand side in Shelby County, that much more of the conversion is likely to be fueled by that urban and high-density development. But what we hope is particularly useful about this report is the amount of county-level data we have, because for the first time, we are giving you numbers by county of what we are showing in terms of projected conversion, that point that Jordan talked about at the very beginning. And we hope that this will be a game changer for folks looking to try and save farm ground at the county level. So let's go down a little bit. Again, I talked about showing what the impact of this conversion might be on the type of land, by land type, as well as the quality of land. So you see here that it says that acres of Indiana's best agricultural land projected to be converted. This is a little bit different than the nationally significant. What we are saying here is that we took those PVR values, and this is the upper half of that land. So the land that is considered the most highly productive These are the numbers both by the state and by the county of what amount of that type of land is likely to be converted. And you see in the business as usual, it's almost 255,000 acres. And under the runaway sprawl scenario, it could be as much as 341,500 acres. Going down, you also see that we've looked at the land type, and not surprisingly, given Indiana's land base and how much land there is, the overwhelming conversion is of cropland with 319,000 acres, 89,000 plus of pasture land, and 42,000 acres of woodland. Now, the note on the woodland is that this is not all forested land in Indiana. This is in the 2020 report. We were able to map woodland associated with a farm. And so this 42,000 acres represents woodland that is part of a farm that we project will be converted. And then the last thing to point out is here what I mentioned earlier about how low density residential land use paves the way for further development. You see that in Indiana, land that was in this low density residential land use in 2016 is 19 times more likely to be further converted to urban and high density development by 2040. So with that, let's go back up and take a minute to look at the downloadable report. This is the summary I mentioned at the beginning in this blue tab. This is easily downloaded, it's easily printed, it's easily shared, and that's why we created it, because we hope that everybody will use it as an information tool with policymakers, with county planners, with reporters and journalists. You name it, we think that there are many useful purposes for this summary document. So here again, you see that 451,000 acres of projected total conversion under the business as usual scenario. And you look at it, and what we did here, and we do have this information for every county, is that we translated that into what we think that will mean in terms of loss of farms, loss of farm output, and loss of jobs. And you see here statewide that we think that this will have the impact of losing over 2,000 farms, 259 million in farm output, and 4,400 jobs associated with farms. And again, all of these numbers were derived from the 2017 Census of Agriculture. You see here, just looking down a little bit further, you see here that 71% of the conversion will occur on Indiana's nationally significant land. And down below, the 3 hardest hit counties, and I believe that is by total acres. Remember earlier I mentioned Marion County. Marion County made a list because it was a very large percent of its agricultural land base that will be converted. I think these are based on total acres converted. And you see here Hamilton, Lake, and Hendricks County, which I think we will look at when we get into the maps. Anyway, just looking very quickly at the rest of this, you can see we talk about the types of conversion, that 19% more likely in terms of low density residential becoming even more highly developed and completely out of agriculture. And so we hope that you all will find this a useful document for education purposes. And with that now, I want to turn it to Angie to, with Beth's help, let us look at a few counties in further detail via the maps.
Great, thanks, Chris, and thank you again, Beth. To get us started, Beth, would you be able to show us the drop-down menu for the 3 modeled scenarios that Chris has described on the left-hand side of the map? Please select runaway sprawl as one modeled scenario on the left, and then on the right map, can you select better built cities as our scenario? Before we dive into the data itself, specific counties, I'd like to show some of the functionality of the maps and how you can change the views to best serve your needs. Can you show, well, first I want to say, again, if your control panel happens to be in the way like mine is right now, to click the orange arrow, and that will minimize your control panel for your webinar. So first, I'd like to show you where the legend is located for this current base map, where you can see that the dark red and orange is the data layer of projected urban and high density and low density residential development. And then the other colors are the land 2016 land cover data base map that's underneath. While we're here, can you demonstrate, Beth, how we can adjust the transparency of the data by using the toggle in the upper right-hand corner of the screen? This will allow you to make the data layer of the projected conversion more transparent and allow you to see the land cover that is underneath throughout the map. And now I'd like to show you how you can change the base map by going to the top right corner. You can select satellite view, giving a bird's eye view of the landscape with selected scenarios, again, stacked on top. And again, with the slider on the right, you can adjust the transparency by moving it back and forth. And then lastly, you can select the standard view, which offers more contrast for the data. I encourage you to play around with the different views for the base map and find which best suits your needs for as you explore around in the map, in the context of the map. So now we are going to take some time in the web app comparing the scenarios that were modeled. We're first going to look at Hamilton County. The modeling shows, as you would expect, that moving out from the population center of Indianapolis and Noblesville is where the greatest low density residential development is expected to occur, which is shown here in those orange blocks. This loss of farmland occurring near city centers like this often disproportionately impacts smaller, diversified farms that serve local markets with fresh produce, eggs, dairy, and meat. Small and peri-urban farms also tend to be the ones to incubate new farmers and are instrumental in navigating supply chain disruptions, as we've seen over the past year or so. Now, Beth, can you move us north to Porter County, just east of Gary, Indiana? Again, we're seeing these large blocks of farmland that will be converted to low density residential, shown here in orange. As Chris mentioned, we know that low density residential areas were 19 times more likely to be converted to urban and high density land use compared to other agricultural land in Indiana. When comparing the two maps and the acreage data below for Porter County, you can see the substantial difference we can make if we invest in policies and programs that Jordan has already highlighted and we'll discuss more about later, when we invest in these policies and programs for smart growth and farmland protection. Back to you, Chris.
Great. Thanks so much, Angie, and thank you, Beth. So we're going to leave the website. We encourage everybody to take their time and look at it. But now that we've talked about the findings, we want to take a few minutes to talk about action. What can all of us collectively do to help choose an abundant future? Our report has policy recommendations in each of these 4 categories and at every level of government. So if you are a county or municipal official, a state legislator, a state agency employee, or a congressional staffer, we hope you might find a recommendation in here that you would like to champion. Please let us know if we can provide you with any additional information about any of the policy ideas in the report. And if you are a farmer, landowner, community advocate, you work for a farm or conservation or smart growth organization, we encourage you to share and discuss these recommendations with your elected and agency representatives and partners. I just want to take a minute to highlight a few of the things that we talk about in the report in each of these categories. In encouraging smart growth, Foundational to smart growth and compact development is good local planning. Comprehensive plans can provide the vision and roadmap for land use regulations that promote compact development and minimize development of a community's best farmland. We encourage communities to have comprehensive plans, and we urge folks who care about the future of farmland and farming to get involved in their county comprehensive plan development process. We also encourage states to support local comprehensive planning and to have a statewide plan for agricultural land retention and protection. Under Protect Agricultural Land, Congress, and this is something that Jordan mentioned at the beginning, Congress will be writing a new farm bill next year, and an important part in that program, in that bill, is what he mentioned, the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, which helps to fund the purchase of agricultural conservation easements from willing farmers and landowners. More funding for that program would help protect more farmland in Indiana. AFT was excited to see an additional $1.4 billion in funding for this program included in the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed by the Senate over the weekend. This bill is likely to be taken up by the House later this week. Under advanced smart solar siting, we know that this is a significant issue in Indiana. State and local governments can incentivize solar development on existing infrastructure and on marginal land, as well as incentivize agrivoltaics or dual use solar development. If solar is located on productive agricultural lands, local governments should ensure that solar development adheres to best practices for the construction and the operation and the decommissioning of the facility in order to preserve soil health, water resources, and the ability to farm the land during and after the life of the project. And lastly, support farmland access, which we know is hugely important. We need a next generation of farmers. State and local governments can develop their own or help to fund extension or nonprofit farm link programs. And those are programs that work with both farmers and landowners who are looking for a successor or someone to lease their land to, and with farm seekers who are looking for land to lease or buy. This type of technical assistance and support can be time-consuming but extremely valuable in making those connections between those exiting farming and those coming into it and helping to keep farmland in farming. And now Angie's going to talk a little bit more about planning for agriculture.
Great. As Chris said, there are key strategies that American Farmland Trust recommends as best practices that have been taken from other places across the nation. Community planning is critically important to smart growth. As part of this, American Farmland Trust encourages communities to plan proactively for agriculture. This involves these 4 basic principles you see here, principles that can work in tandem with efforts to plan for smarter, more compact development. They include inventorying resources in your area, whether that be your productive, versatile, and resilient soils that we've talked about, riparian corridors, view sheds, watersheds. Perhaps most important of these is engaging farmers in planning for the future of agriculture. We need to engage farmers in the public process, ask them what their vision is for the future of agriculture and community and what they hope to see. Community planning is critically important to smart growth. In fact, I'd like to call it a resource that is highlighted here on the slide on the left, the Community Planning for Agriculture and Natural Resources publication produced by Purdue Extension, Indiana State Department of Ag, and the Indiana Land Resources Council. This is a guide for local governments to help identify strategies and associated tools and policies to support these local planning goals. This guide encourages communities to incorporate agriculture and other natural resources into community plans, like Chris has mentioned, which can be done through comprehensive plans to inform the use of these tools to protect our resources. And finally, the implementation of tools to retain and protect agricultural land, many of which Jordan and Chris have captured, which includes things like urban growth boundaries, agricultural zoning, and farmland protection programs, just to name a few. We have a wealth of resources on planning for agriculture. It truly is a repository including the guide I highlighted here that can be found at our Farmland Information Center website. And I truly hope that you will check them out as you navigate this planning for agricultural charge.
Great, thank you, Angie. Okay, so now all three of us are going to turn our cameras back on. And we do have a couple of questions. I encourage folks to please go ahead and ask any more questions if you have them. Again, one last reminder to do it. You go to the questions section in that control panel. You pop open that little square on the far right-hand side, and that'll give you a chance to ask a question. So we have a couple, and actually the first one I can answer. It's an easy one. Is it possible to pull statistics for each county in regards to projected loss of farmland and the resulting impact to number of farms, jobs, etc.? And the answer to that is yes. So the way you would do it is to go back into the website, which again, you now have a link in the chat, and up there in the upper right-hand corner where it says request data, you would go in there and you would fill out the form and say what you want, that you're looking for this kind of information either for a specific county or for all counties in Indiana. So that's an easy one. This next question is directed to Jordan, because the question is, Jordan, in what areas were the NRCS conservation easements done? And it says, what is the name of the grant program? I assume that it was the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, but if you want to elaborate, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the question on where, I think I referenced 21 new contracts for this conservation easement program through NRCS in 2020. That was the best available data I was able to pull. Question is where those occurred at. And we protect privacy, right, with really all these projects, conservation projects, but we can tell you by county. And I would bring you to the Indiana Conservation Partnerships, Conservation Accomplishments. If you just Google that, you should see a website that the Department of Ag maintains where you can see where really all Farm Bill projects, regardless of if it was in Conservation Reserve Program or the Conservation Easement Program, where those occurred at a county level. So Indiana Conservation Accomplishments brings you to that data dashboard that you can then, similar to your nice GIS tools that are ArcMap based, you can see by county the types of Farm Bill programs, the number of contracts, number of dollars that went into that county.
Great, that is super helpful. I'm just going to talk a minute about other resources. Jordan, you mentioned going to the NRCS page, which is very helpful. Another set of resources on the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program can be found on our Farmland Information Center, and actually we worked very closely with NRCS to do these, and they are resources that are both for the entities. So for this particular program, a landowner can't apply individually. The landowner needs to go through either a land trust or a county program of some kind. And we have resources that explain this on both the landowner, how you would go about looking for a land trust or a county program, of which there is one in Indiana, and how an entity would go about applying. So those are resources, and we will get, when we get to the end, actually here on this question tab, you see the link to the Farmland Information Center, and that takes you to those resources. Just one other thing to point out, that there is another federal program that can be used to protect agricultural land. It is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. Again, it's not a program that landowners can apply to individually. They need to be working with a conservation district or a county or a state agency, or there are a number of different pathways there. But that program, which it is also slated to get significantly more funding for it is one where there can be the purchase of agricultural conservation easements. So it's worth pointing that out as another sort of pathway. Let me go to someone asked if I could share this interest. Liz Brownlee, who is the Director of Farmer Programs for Partners Indiana Food and Farming, or PIF as the acronym, she says, would be delighted to talk with others about creating a land link for Indiana. So if anyone is interested in doing that, her email address is liz@indianafarming.org. We have one other question, and Jordan, I don't know, this is not a project that I'm aware of. I don't know if you are. There's a question about the Mid-States Corridor project and what impact that is going to have on farms and forests. And I don't know if you have any knowledge of that or information about that particular project.
Yeah, it's kind of close to my backyard at home. Mid-States Corridor is a road construction project that's being proposed, really led by INDOT, Indiana Department of Transportation, and they've got a website with the mapping and the proposed routes. There's an environmental impact statement that they've had to do for all those routes that's on that website as well. So that's probably the best I could direct for the information at hand is INDOT Mid-States Corridor project to see that information, specifically the environmental impact statement.
Right. And I'm not seeing any more questions. Let me give people one more chance to put something in, but I'm just going to use a minute to ask you, Jordan, when we were doing the solar modeling, one of the challenges with our data is that we were using, it was not the most up-to-date because we started this project a couple of years ago, right? And when you look at our conversion data, while it picks up solar development as a high density land use if it's a large enough project, if those projects weren't already on the ground by 2016, it doesn't show up in terms of projecting. And so I'm curious whether the department has a good sense of the extent of solar development that is likely to happen, knowing that you are in sort of the crosshairs. And I know that you talked about putting together some model ordinance language, and is that something that folks can find somewhere if they're trying to get their county to be focused on solar conversion?
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Chris, and kind of two parts there. The first is, can you get a good picture of lay of the land for solar that's already on the ground, large scale solar, and then that may be contracted coming, under construction. We, as the Department of Ag right now, do not maintain that kind of database. Our sister agency, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, is probably the best go-to to get an idea of what's on the ground today, what's planned. I know there's been discussion in the state about a more kind of interactive a map or lay of the land, as you allude to, and as this project has done. But right now, really the lead entity that gets involved in these discussions and contracts is, again, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. So that was the first question. And then on the number two question, remind me real quick what that was.
How do people, you mentioned model ordinances, where would people find those?
Yeah, excellent. And it was alluded to, there's a screenshot of kind of the cover page of Purdue Extension Department of Ag project. But all you'd really have to do is search Indiana Land Use Council, which put together that document, and that will have the list of the other model ordinances that were released by that Indiana Land Resources Council.
Great, thank you so much. Well, seeing that it's time, we don't want to keep folks, and that there were no more questions, so that's good. Anyway, let's do this. Let me, in 30 seconds, talk about these two resources here. Again, the National Agricultural Land Network, this is just a pitch. If we would welcome having people join, we really hope that it will help to, at the community and county level, to give people some new tools and connections to be thinking about how to save farmland in a variety of different ways. So please join us. It's free. You see the farmland.org/NALN. The Farmland Information Center, again, is a collaborative project with USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service. It is a wealth of information with both data and policy, information for landowners, information about the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, and a variety of other things. And they answer the phone with their technical assistance. So anybody who has a question, please feel free to call that number. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Angie to close us out.
Great. Thank you, all of you who attended today and has hung on with us a couple of minutes after the hour. And thank you, Chris and Jordan, both for a great conversation. I'm grateful to be part of this project, and we hope that you will take your learnings and advocate for farmland protection. Other than that, again, just thank you for attending, and I'll see you on down the road.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.